All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to spend this Friday afternoon, at least it's afternoon where I am right now, on the East Coast with you. It is State of the Union Friday since Biden delivered his possibly final State of the Union yesterday. I don't think it's going to be his last one. I actually think he is going to be reelected. And I have always been somewhat skeptical of the narrative that Donald Trump was going to win big or even win small in November. The polling I always have viewed as very, very tight, and we'll see that yesterday's poll before SOTU actually shows Joe Biden. One poll anyway, the Emerson poll, which is a reputable poll, shows Joe Biden actually leading. I think he is going to win this race. So those of you who have Trump derangement syndrome, fear not. The skies are lifting. The sun is starting to rise. I personally don't care. I don't have any brief for Joe Biden. I don't think he has been a good president. I think he's done very bad things for our country and our world. But I certainly won't vote for Donald Trump either. So for me, I'm kind of a bystander watching from the sidelines in horror, in absolute horror. I didn't watch SOTU, by the way, called it Same Old Trash Utterances. I was going to say campaigns, but you know what? It's like it's a 1 hour advertorial. Back in the old radio station days, I used to play these, advertorial, whatever, infomercials, I guess is what they're called, for pills and things, diet pills or blueberry. It's just a load of crap. It was a load of crap. I always felt a little bit dirty that I even played those. I never really felt good about it, but I mean, the money was essential. We had to get money from somewhere, and we got enough to keep going for a while, in part because of those infomercials. So I never listened to them. I never had any, thing but contempt for the companies that peddle them. And I feel the same way about our two major political parties and these, performative acts, right? I mean, if you want to watch good acting, don't go to Washington. Go to Hollywood. And if you're not a great actor like Ronald Reagan, he was okay, wasn't terrible. But where did he have his greatest success? In Washington, D.C., because he was a good actor for Washington. He actually, I think, did win an Academy Award maybe for King's Row, Best Supporting Actor. I'm not sure. He did get nominated for that, and that's a good movie. I do recommend it. Very good. King's Row. All right, let's start with the beginning of Joe Biden's speech yesterday evening. And, I'm going to jump around a lot. I didn't want, again, I'm only looking at what the, folks that I follow on YouTube, and actually Fox News had the clips pretty nicely set out so I could go from topic to topic, without having to cut and paste throughout that over 1 hour presentation by President Biden. So here, let's start with this first, about the first minute in of his speech.
And yes, my purpose tonight is to wake up the Congress and alert the American people that this is no ordinary moment either. Not since President Lincoln and the Civil War have freedom and democracy been under assault at home as they are today. What makes our moment rare is that freedom and democracy are under attack both at home and overseas. I'm
going to just stop it there for a sec. There's always this always the most important election ever of all time. We've never faced these kind of crises before. I guess. I mean, look, Trump's scary. He is. I don't deny it. But we were a nation of torturers when George W. Bush was president. I mean, are things worse now than when we had a torturer in chief who, at best, let our nation get hit on 9/11? Richard Nixon, conducted or oversaw a crime enterprise with G. Gordon Liddy when he was president. Kissinger turned Chile into a tyranny after there had been a democratically elected socialist. So I don't know. I mean, things are bad now. I would agree with the climate holocaust right now puts a totally different spin on everything, right? I mean, it's really the existential threat of all existential threats. It's not like the nuclear holocaust, which was a terrible threat, but one that could, and apparently, at least so far, we've sidestepped. We are not engaged in, and maybe we'll never be in a full-scale nuclear holocaust, but we are engaged in a full-scale climate holocaust. So maybe for that reason, this is the most fraught time in American history. That said, neither president is doing anything. Neither the current president nor the former president who wants to be the next the president again is doing anything, has done anything except make the problem worse. So if you're saying it's really bad, Biden, things are really important that we elect the right leader, I'm not going to disagree with you, but if the choice is you and Trump, then we're electing the wrong leader, clearly.
Very same time. Overseas, Putin of Russia is on the march, invading Ukraine and sowing chaos throughout Europe and beyond.
All right, so I heard that statement, the sowing chaos in Europe and beyond, and I was like, really? I didn't think there was so much chaos throughout Europe because of what the invasion. I mean, it's not great. If you live in, Eastern Germany, maybe you're a little bit afraid, I guess, possibly. But I don't really think he's sowing chaos throughout Europe and beyond. I mean, Russia's advance was stymied pretty early. They've demonstrated that they don't have a military that's capable of even taking over a much smaller, less populous neighbor. And it's clear that that Biden, oh my God, Hal, Putin's territorial ambitions are clearly limited. I mean, he said as much. There's no reason to think he's going to go beyond Ukraine or wants to go beyond Ukraine. And in fact, if we made any effort to broker some kind of a peace deal, and in fact, I'm going to show you a clip from the New York Times, relatively recent, that shows that we could hopefully diffuse the situation. Biden, of course, is arguing for more weaponry, more killing in Ukraine. The wrong message.
If anybody in this room thinks Putin will stop at Ukraine, I assure you he will not.
Right. What's the evidence for that? See, this is the kind of thing, it's just ginning up war fever. Okay, that's what he's trying to do. And, remember the old saying, you don't switch horses in midstream. That's what Abe Lincoln said to win his re-election campaign in 1864. And maybe that's Biden's theory. I'm a war president. George W. Bush was a war president. So we can't let the conflict, have two different commanders in chief. There has to be just one. I'm the commander in chief when it comes to Ukraine, so you got to re-elect me. Ukraine war, proxy war. It's ridiculous. All right, I guess that was the segment I wanted to play because you now hear the raucous applause. We didn't see Kamala there. She's over his right shoulder. You can see half of her head. Let me see if you can definitely see it. And then, of course, I guess Mike Johnson on the other side, the Speaker of the House. She's not jumping up and shouting, but again, this is just an advertisement for the Biden administration, and it doesn't really do anything for me. And I'm just not going to waste my time watching that nonsense, but I can learn about it after the fact. If you want to tell me your thoughts, I would love to hear them. 240-283-7262. I've been saying that a lot lately, how I really want to hear what you have to say, and I haven't heard it. So do me a solid, give me a call, 240-242-5646. Joe Biden says Putin's territorial ambitions go far beyond Ukraine. If you think he's going to stop there, then you got another thing coming, right? I mean, that's his argument, why we need to just keep funding endless war, keep the proxy war going. Even the New York Times, even the neocon New York Times begs to defer. This is back at the end of last year, Serge Shaman, who's with the editorial page, op-ed page, or editorial page rather, and he's a neocon. He's not any kind of a peacenik like I am. This guy is a big believer, and we got to take it to Putin. We got to defeat Putin. Putin's the enemy. But, he reads the writing on the wall. He's like, nah, we're not going to win militarily. So we should be waging peace. And Joe Biden did not get that memo. Since this article from came out in the New York Times, things only got worse in Ukraine for the Ukrainian military and for the United States. The opportunity to broker a relatively, a palatable, acceptable peace deal keeps getting more difficult. The opportunity is being lost because as Russia is advancing, they are going to be less and less likely to accept some kind of buffer zone between Russia and the former line, just have a small buffer zone inside of Eastern Ukraine frontier. Now that they've moved forward and taken cities, they're going to be negotiating more aggressively, which again shows why we should have been pushing for peace much earlier, and we would have had a better opportunity to get a deal that we would be comfortable with and that Ukraine would be comfortable with. But according to this article back at the end of last year, Sheeman, the Ukrainian-Russian front is in a figurative and literal freeze. Actually, not at this point. Russia is on the march. Russia is advancing. And if you're going to say, well, that's because we're not supplying Ukraine anymore because there's been a hold by the Republicans, no. The Ukrainian counteroffensive, which we supplied, which we provided significant support for, very significant support for, basically went nowhere and exacted huge costs and casualties and materiel. That, if nothing else, should have been the wake-up call to the warmongers among the voting public. I'm not talking about people in the Pentagon. I'm not talking about the Victoria Nulands who's stepping down right now. I'm not talking about the Joe Bidens and the Hillary Clintons who've made a career of fear-mongering about Russia. I'm just saying the average voter. Those who say, no, we can't, we got to stick it to Putin. We can't let Putin win. I think the fact that we spent all that money and the result was hundreds of thousands of lives lost, many more casualties, land laid waste, billions and billions and billions of dollars burned up. I think at that point, maybe there should be a wake-up call that continuing this war, perpetrating it, perpetuating it, is a terrible mistake. And can we please move in a different direction? Unfortunately, tragically, sadly, I don't think a lot of people got that memo. But I'll keep sending it out. I'll keep shooting out that memo as long as I have an opportunity to do so. Since at the time, and I mentioned this, at the time this article came out, it appeared that, the writer even says they're in a literal and figurative freeze. Literal because it was really cold then. It was winter. Even with the climate holocaust, it still gets cold in Eastern Europe in winter. Russia thought it was going to have an easy time of it. Remember, this is why this is important. Russia is winning the war, but at a tremendous cost to Russia. A tremendous cost in lives, a political cost, a very significant cost for Putin. This is no walk in the park. Maybe Putin thought it would be, but it sure hasn't proven to be. And that's why the argument by Biden that this is throwing Europe into chaos and the whole world is terrified of this man, Putin, is absurd. Their army has been exposed as not that powerful, not that nothing. It's not the Wehrmacht in 1940 that rolled up all of Western Europe. It's nothing like that. But it is it's a powerful modern army that is that Ukraine cannot match. And unless we're prepared to start World War III, because that's what would happen if the United States went in there, or if Western Europe, if NATO started sending in troops and a nuclear holocaust, let's just accept it. Russia was very, very peeved, very angry that we were pushing and pushing and pushing Ukraine to join NATO, that we were pushing Ukraine to provoke Russia by firing on Russian speakers in eastern Ukraine, that we did foment a revolution in Ukraine against Yanukovych, who was not like some sort of Putin puppet, but was a Russophile. Acknowledge what we've done, and at least according to Shaman, let's just declare victory and go home. And that's what he's saying we could do it. He says, hey, look, it's not great right now. This is in December, but look, Avdiivka is still in Ukrainian hands. It's really, really hard for Russia too. Their army isn't that great. And of course he's right. Of course he's right. Their army is not great. But in the end, it's too much for Ukraine. And that's why we shouldn't be promoting endless war. We should be promoting peace. Joe Biden, obviously in his speech, going in the complete opposite direction. And if you wanted more proof for why he doesn't deserve a second term, well, that's it. I mean, he doesn't he refuses to accept, to acknowledge how costly in both human terms and financial terms this war has been, and refuses, to say, okay, well, let's just stop. Let's just stop. And of course, we keep seeing, because of that, actually Russia is getting ultimately stronger and is ultimately prevailing. So, I don't watch the States of the Union. I don't care. He's not telling me anything new. But this is what we need to know. Ukraine is falling. And the best way to stop this is not to keep propping it up, not keep sending in arms, not maybe sending the U.S. Army. We saw how well that worked in Afghanistan. After 20 years, we leave and the country falls apart. I guess we could stay there forever. As I pointed out, because this is so critically important to why Joe Biden does not deserve a second term. The experts have said it's not a matter of Ukraine winning. The best they can hope for is hold their existing front lines. So again, what Joe Biden is calling for is endless war, for stalemate, more death, and more money sent into a bottomless pit to the benefit of the military-industrial complex. No, he does not deserve a second. Of course, I'm not going to vote for Trump. Let's be real clear. Let's be real. But, if you want to say, well, if you don't vote for Biden, you're voting for Trump, I'm going to say, well, okay, if that's the way you want it, if that's how you're going to frame it, fine. Then I'm voting for Trump. No, I'm just not going to vote for somebody who is calling for endless war in Ukraine, a war that's been incredibly destructive, harmful, and I don't see the alternatives that are so much better. Well, maybe on Israel, maybe he's better.
Tonight, I'm directing the U.S. military to lead an emergency mission to establish a temporary pier in the Mediterranean on the coast of Gaza that can receive.
Does that strike you as absurd, as it strikes me, as ridiculous? The people in Gaza are starving to death because we keep supplying Israel with weapons of mass destruction, enormous cluster bombs, residential hospitals that they're destroying, residential blocks, hospitals that Israel is destroying with them, machine guns, artillery, the whole 9 yards that army that has killed over 30,000 Gazans, most of whom are children, or many of whom are children, and most of whom are women or children. That's us. They're using our weapons. We trained the Israel Defense Forces. Those are special advisors. So rather than just say, no more Israel, stop it, stop killing, what does Joe Biden say? Oh, we're going to build a pier. We're going to build a pier. Who's going to get to that pier? You got to crawl through rubble to get to that pier. When it's finally built, well, let's listen to a little bit more of this absurd nonsense.
Large shipments carrying food, water, medicine, and temporary shelters. No U.S. boots will be on the ground.
Well, why not? I don't understand this. I was talking to a friend of mine. He's a Muslim. He was telling me that one of the great things, like why he doesn't hate the United States. And we were talking about what's going on now. And he's like, well, I remember when the United States intervened in Bosnia to save the Muslims in the Balkans from Milosevic and the killers from Serbia. And the U.S. intervened and saved, thousands and thousands of Muslim lives. They didn't build a pier. They sent in the U.S. military to do it, to protect them. Why aren't our boots on the ground saying to Israel, stop? I'll tell you what, if our boots were on the ground, Israel would stop. Israel would not be shooting at U.S. troops. I can guarantee you. Now, they've killed some American citizens. Brianna Joy Gray did a video about that, how since Oct 7, at least 2 Americans have been killed by the Israeli law enforcement and military, at least 2 in the West Bank. So they have killed Americans, has Israel, but they're not going to fire on the U.S. Army. I guarantee you that. That would be the way, if you really wanted to protect lives, Joe Biden, you send in the U.S. military, and I guarantee you the killing will stop by Israel. But no, he won't do that.
Temporary pier will enable a massive increase in the amount of humanitarian assistance getting into Gaza every day.
I
mean, come on. Really? And Israel must do its part. Israel must allow more aid into Gaza to ensure humanitarian workers aren't caught in the crossfire.
Well, I mean, of course, and they need to stop killing. But is there a plan for forcing Israel to do that? I mean, we heard there was a ceasefire imminent. Remember that? Didn't happen, didn't pan out. That was right before Michigan, where you lost a lot of votes to uncommitted Joe Biden. By the way, if Joe Biden wins re-election, I think he will. All of this is just going to be forgotten. All the anger, all the criticism of the Democrats by the progressive wing, the fact that, people, challenged AOC, that when Adam Schiff was giving a victory speech, there were protesters calling ceasefire now, and he's visibly shaken. Trust me, that's all going to be forgotten. No one's going to, to the extent it's remembered, it's going to be like, see, those lefties, they don't know what they're doing. They're nothing. They got no power. Or if, on the other hand, Biden does go down to defeat, let's say he loses, Michigan. Maybe Michigan is the ultimate decider, and he loses because, the students at University of Michigan, Michigan State, and of course the Muslim population does not vote for him, and he loses. You know what's going to happen? The pundits are going to say, man, what was the matter with those people? Look at how much worse Trump is. Didn't they get it? Don't they understand the way politics works? You have to choose one or the other. They don't. So whatever happens, progressives are going to lose. People who demand accountability from the Democratic Party are going to lose. If the Democrats win, then they won despite all the backbiting and the unfair, unjust criticism from the left, which has no power. That'll be what the pundits say. Or, wow, boy, did those progressives take us down the garden path and destroy everything by electing Donald Trump. Either way, progressives are going to lose. I'll tell you who's losing, though. The people of Gaza are losing. The American people are losing because we are accepting this duopoly. This duopoly is the status quo.
They're announcing they're going to have a crossing in northern Gaza. The leadership of the Israelites say this: humanitarian assistance cannot be a secondary consideration or a bargaining chip.
What are you going to do?
Protecting and saving innocent lives has to be a priority. As we look to the future, the only real solution to the situation.
By the way, I love the way you see Ayanna Pressley nodding. And is that Omar next to her? Ilhan Omar, I think, next to her. Let me just see if I can get back to that real quick. I just want to see, because I thought that was an interesting little aside there. Let's see if we can get them back. Yeah. So there's, Omar and Pressley, and she has to stop sending bombs. And I'm glad that Omar is not nodding, right? Pressley is, but not Omar.
The only real solution to the situation is a two-state solution over time.
And by the way, that's not the solution. I love the way, again, look at how quickly Kamala jumps up. No, one-state solution. Everybody in the region is a citizen of one country, from the river to the sea. Everyone has equal say. Religious rights, economic rights are all respected. That's the solution. All right, so Biden blows that, bungles that, bombs that, however you want to say. Just real quick, this is from my friend Stephanie. She posted this on Facebook. So, Biden's like, well, we got to provide more humanitarian aid. We've got to have a peer, because it's worked out so well when we have been trying to provide assistance, in terms of food and humanitarian aid. Here's the image of it. Struck and killed 5 Palestinians. So they're dropping the aid from the skies, and they plummet to the ground. They're very heavy. Some people are hit, and they're killed. So, what could go wrong? I guess at pier, you're not going to drop things from the sky. Ships can run aground. I mean, who knows, right? I mean, you have trucks that might fall into the Mediterranean Sea as they go out on that pier to pick up supplies. This is no substitute. This is no substitute for peace. It's no substitute for demanding that Israel back off immediately. All right. Joe Biden got a lot of positive media response. Obviously the usual suspects, CNN, MSNBC. Paul Krugman loved what he heard. Oh my God, he was so impressed. I'll show you what he had to say in a moment. But I do want to platform this man, Mitchell Plitnick. And I also want to thank my good friend Katharina. I hope I said it right. Katharina. Sorry, I have a little trouble with saying that name. Katharina posted this. And Mitchell Plitnick makes just great points all the way through. I'm not going to read all of it to you, but I do urge it to you. A quick response to SOTU. Standard, what did I call it? Standard something of the trash utterances. I don't remember. I can't even remember what I called it. Something of trash. Let's see. Same old trash utterances. There you go. That was good. Same old trash utterances. All right. A quick response to the same old trash utterances. If you like theater, speech was what you wanted. I don't, at least not political theater. If you care about substance, you come away with just as much despair as you came into it with. Yeah, absolutely, because there was real substance. I mean, I give it to him. He's going to build a pier. We got to promote endless war in Ukraine. So yeah, there was plenty of substance, but that's not good. It wasn't good substance. It wasn't something we should be happy about. Just the opposite, in fact. And, Plitnick points out there's a good reason that substantive criticism of his, and I love this because this is so true, what Plitnick is saying, that substantive criticisms of Biden's performance focus on his policies. That's what I try to do. It really is. You know what? I spend very little time saying he's too old. I think he is too old. But as Plitnick says, if his policies were better, it wouldn't bother me much. It would bother me the same. I mean, if his policies are good, they're good. And that's how I vote. And of course, Trump is old too. Not quite as old, but he's old. And at least according to Arlen, who I believe, who I'm sure is telling the truth, Trump's making a lot of gaffes. He's showing his age too. He's getting a lot of things wrong also. I don't really focus on that. I don't really focus on either one in that regard. But yeah, it would be better to have a young, vibrant president. That was one of the good things about President Obama. But the problem is a young, vibrant president can do a lot of damage, right? They're more active. They have the ability to wreak more havoc, apparently. I'm not certain about that. I think what always matters in the end is policy and nothing else. So Plitnick says, hey, look, he did a pretty good job from the standpoint of, reading his lines. He didn't stutter too much. He didn't get confused. So I guess from that standpoint, says Plitnick, it was a pretty good presentation. But when it comes to what he actually said, yeah, I understood what he said. He was clear. He wasn't confused. But what he said was really bad. So maybe he was sharp and witty. He was heckled. I didn't see that. But so what? Who cares? That's what I don't understand why anyone really cares about anything but what the president actually does. Yeah, rhetoric's important, but what matters is what they do. Obviously, that's not the case for Paul Krugman. So and by the way, I love how I think he has Nobel Prize winner in his Twitter feed. I love that. This is the kind of crap that I find so irritating. So Krugman, a thought, the whole Biden is too old thing was kind of a bubble in the sense that people were buying it mainly because other people were buying it. Okay, no, he is too old. He didn't burst that bubble. Yes, he presented well. And no, his age should not be the determining factor. But yeah, he's too old. Why are you pretending he's not, Krugman? Well, he has such contempt for the electorate. And it's sad. It's sad because I used to really admire Paul Krugman. He's a good writer. He is more progressive on economics than a lot of others out there. He refused to stand up, though, against free trade. He wouldn't do it. He refused to insist that we need Medicare for all. He kneecapped Bernie over and over and over and ankle bit him over and over and over. He's a problem. He's a major, major problem. And now this crap. Okay, so he was able to get through that speech. So we're not supposed to worry about his age? Just absurd. I thought this was a good headline. I wanted to just show this too because I like this headline. I thought Aaron Blake did a good job with this. And when I first saw it, I didn't like it because I was like, you're making it all partisan, which he is. And Aaron Blake, I believe, is a Democratic analyst, or he writes, at least he presents for the Washington Post from the standpoint of the Democratic Party. But he's right. His insistence that we need to support Ukraine is a problem for Republicans, not because he's right, because he's wrong. And frankly, on this issue, Marjorie Taylor Greene and maybe Trump, although it's unclear what Trump does or doesn't think, but certainly Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's against it, is right. But yes, Blake, you're right. It was a smart move politically for Biden to bring it up, even though most Americans don't support. And I think I showed a graphic of this over the summer. I'm sure it's only stronger now. Most Americans don't support endless war, don't want us to keep funding the war in Ukraine. But politically, it's definitely a problem for the Republicans because, most of them are captive to the military-industrial complex, people like McConnell. the old guard in the House, many of whom have been voted out of office, probably Kevin McCarthy, big fans of endless war, proxy wars with Russia. So this is an internal fight in the Republican Party that Democrats are all united in support of endless war, in support of sticking it to Putin, sacrificing every fight to the last Ukrainian as far as the Democrats are concerned. So they're united, and obviously, certainly progressive Jamie Raskin is taking the money there from Lockheed Martin and talking about how evil Putin is, and nary a word of concern for the dead and dying Ukrainian soldiers and their families. Well, it's cost of war, cost of doing business. That's Jamie Raskin's position, that progressive stalwart. Democrats don't have a problem with Ukraine. They're all in favor of it. There is mixed feelings on the Republican side. So I thought that was a really good headline. Okay, I wanted to bring this up because Arlen has been saying, and Arlen will be on Monday, I believe. Arlen has been making the point. He has thought, Trump wasn't even going to make it to November 7th, whatever election day is. I don't know if it's the 7th. Wasn't going to make it to November. Arlen has argued that Trump wouldn't be the Republican nominee. And I pushed back. I'm like, well, I think he is. He's winning all these primaries. He was way ahead in the polls. Now he has no real opponent since former Governor Haley stepped down from the race. He got endorsed by all the other Republicans except for her who were running. So I don't see Trump not being the Republican nominee. But what I have agreed with Arlen is that I don't think Trump will win the election. I just have been very skeptical. Now, would I ever bet on things like that? No. Oh boy, my bulb just popped out. Sorry, folks. That's kind of weird. Always lighting stuff, right? And I had the lighting good, but I think that's just a burnout bulb. I think that problem will be resolved. Okay, so Emerson poll came out yesterday. This is before SOTU. Biden will get a little bump from that masterful performance where he put to bed any concerns about his age, right? He'll probably go up another couple of points. But Emerson's saying, Biden's up by 2. Now, if he goes into Election Day up by 2, he might not win. But I think he's going to win. And he might win even if he's up by 2. I know he almost lost the Electoral College, but he won it. He won it, and by a decent margin, but states like Georgia and Arizona were very close. Michigan was not so close. I certainly wouldn't call it a landslide, but remember, Joe Biden got well over 50%. I was surprised to see this. Hillary did not get half the vote. People say, Hillary won the election. She won the popular vote. She got the most votes of any candidate. She won the plurality of votes. She did not get 50% of the votes. And in fact, Trump plus Gary Johnson, the Libertarian, got more votes combined. They got more than half the votes in the election versus Jill Stein and Hillary Clinton. But Biden did really well. Biden got over 51% plus, I believe. And he won well over 300 electoral votes. So he won. He won clearly. He won decisively. He won decisively over Trump. He had 5%, I think, 46 versus 51, somewhere in that neighborhood, 5% more. If he's up by 2 and he wins by 2%, so let's say he goes 48-46, 49-47, 50-48, does Biden win? I don't know. I think he does. I think he does because the Great Lakes states, I think, are going to come back to him. And I think there are just too many voters right now who are so disenchanted with, so afraid of Donald Trump that he will lose. That's just my guess, my prediction. I could be wrong, but the polling has definitely shown that Biden's far from out of it. And people say, Biden needs to step down, Biden this. Look, I don't think Biden's the strongest candidate the Democrats could put up, but I have no idea who that strongest candidate is. And maybe he is the strongest because it's not going to be Kamala. And it's not, I don't believe, Gavin Newsom. So maybe Biden is the best candidate they have. to be perfectly honest with you. I do think if it were Nikki Haley running against Biden, and I've said this, she might be able to beat him, right? Because she just looks so much better than he does. All right, I've talked a lot about the United States, mostly foreign policy. Haven't really talked about the situation domestically. Yes, the economy is going great guns for corporations. Corporate profits are up. Unemployment is down, which is good, but wages are, and they are starting to rise. But we're not seeing any real transition towards a worker-centered economy. It's the same old yo-yo roller coaster, boom and bust cycle that lines some people's pockets with billions and others barely able to survive in good times and living out of their cars when times ain't so good. So I'm not going to give Joe Biden a whole lot of credit. A big reason for the boom is the deficit spending. You know, Keynesian economics makes the point that when the government spends money and injects it into the economy goes better, right? So we keep spending more money than we have, the economy is going to continue to stay relatively strong in that moment. But I don't believe this is some sustainable. In the end, we can't keep spending more than we have. And the way you address that problem is you tax the rich. You tax the billionaire class who spend a tiny fraction, consume a tiny fraction of what they have. You take a lot of their wealth away from them. Much of it was ill-gotten anyway. And you make sure that poor, struggling working people have enough. And that's how you build a sustainable economy. Neither Joe Biden nor Donald Trump has any interest in doing that. And the Democratic Party doesn't either. Certainly the Republican Party doesn't. I was thinking about this very issue when I saw the story. Now, things are terrible in Haiti. I spent a lot of time talking about Israel and Ukraine, and they're getting more headlines. It's not really fair. Haiti is very close to the United States, right? The island, Santo Domingo, I believe, is the island where the Dominican Republic shares it with Haiti. And that country is just in the most dire poverty. It's tragic. I mean, when you see, I've never been there, but I've read a little bit about it, right? So I'm sure I know less than most people. But as of what I understand it was once a beautiful, green, verdant island. Slavery did tremendous harm. The enslavers chopped down all the trees, grew sugar cane, and did a lot of damage, a lot of harm to the land. It continued after emancipation, which was by a revolution, Toussaint Louverture. And then the French government never recognized Haiti, forced them to be having to defend themselves. The United States boycotted, refused to recognize Haiti, did all sorts of damage to the government and the country there. And it's been exploited by colonialism throughout its, since basically Columbus. So Haiti is very, very sad, dangerous place. And now gangs have taken it over. The government simply doesn't have the resources, the wherewithal, or probably even the will to fight. And hungry people, desperate people will join gangs. And they've basically taken over the country. They're cutting off any kind of food, any kind of supplies, so that they'll control everything within the country. And just as we're seeing hunger stalking Gaza, it looks like that's going to happen in Haiti as well, if it isn't already. And I was thinking, we've seen countries falling apart. We saw that happen with Afghanistan, with the Taliban taking over as soon as we withdrew. We saw that in Vietnam back in the 70s when we pulled out of Vietnam, when we stopped propping up the South Vietnam government, fell to the to the Viet Cong, Ho Chi Minh. And that is basically what we've done to Haiti in a different way, not militarily, but our corporations, our garment manufacturers, and our politicians have basically decimated that country and hollowed it out. There's no middle class. There's just almost all poor people. And this brought me back again to what Hillary Clinton did back when she was the Secretary of State. And there you can see her touring a garment factory, a sweatshop. The women in that image, in that picture, all lined up next to each other wearing their green uniforms, making, according to Lee Camp, 24 cents an hour. My understanding was they were making 29 cents. So I'm not sure. I guess it has to do with how you, the exchange rate, right, when you calculate it. Hillary Clinton pressured very, very aggressively, very hard, the Haiti government not to accede to a populist referendum calling for a minimum wage hike to somewhere between 59 and 61 cents an hour. And she stopped it. And that, what we see now are the fruits of that kind of policy, that kind of exploit labor at any price policy. You can see her in the picture. She's not looking at the worker. She's just listening rapidly to what that heavy set, I would say fat white man in the shirt is saying. She couldn't give a rat's ass about those workers. So this is the fruits of the Democratic policies, which are just as bad, just as harmful, just as destructive in so many ways as Republican ones. Don't come to me and tell me that they deserve, they merit my vote. That all happened when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State. Joe Biden was Vice President. We got to go in a different direction. I don't want Donald Trump to be president, but I can tell you this. If the Democrats win, they ain't changing nothing. All right, I hope you have a great weekend. I really do. I mean, it's sort of laugh because it's so awful, right? I mean, you got to laugh to keep from crying. Things are so bad. And it doesn't matter who wins. We lose.